It's Friday, March the 8th, 2024, and let us gather together and experience the goodness of God. I'm Pastor Trey Comstock. We begin with our scripture of the week, 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verses 18 through 25, and a piece by me entitled, We Have a Narcissist Problem. Then, Pastor Emily and I will talk scripture, and more specifically, how the church at Corinth seems to be a painful predictor of modern Christianity. But first, a reading from 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verses 18 through 25. For the message about the cross is foolishness to those who are perishing, but to us who are being saved, it is the power of God. For it is written, I will destroy the wisdom of the wise, and the discernment of the discerning I will thwart. Where is the one who is wise? Where is the scribe? Where is the debater of this age? Has not God made foolish the wisdom of the world? For since, in the wisdom of God, the world did not know God through wisdom, God decided, through the foolishness of proclamation, to save those who believe. For Jews demand signs, and Greeks desire wisdom, but we proclaim Christ crucified, a stumbling block to Jews and foolishness to Gentiles. But to those who are called, both Jews and Greeks, Christ, the power of God, and the wisdom of God. For God's foolishness is wiser than human wisdom, and God's weakness is stronger than human strength. We have a narcissism problem, and apparently always have. The more time that I spend with Paul's letter to the Corinthians, I become more impressed with their ability to presage the struggles of the modern church. One of the core pillars of the conflict between Paul and the Corinthian church centers on authority, or more to the point, does Paul really have authority? Here in 1 Corinthians 1, Paul pushes back against their expectations of what a teacher of great truth will look like. He chides the Greeks for wanting their great and eloquent debaters, as it says in verse 20, Where is the one who is wise? Where is the scribe? Where is the debater of this age? Has not God made foolish the wisdom of the world? As a city connected to a couple of different ports of call, Corinth, in particular, got a lot of these great philosophical speakers passing through, and it seems that the Corinthian congregation has found their own more debonair, better-spoken, expectation-meeting teacher, Apollos. He gave the upper-class portion of the Corinthian congregation what they wanted: eloquence, credentials, and all the correct cultural hallmarks. Everyone, even Paul, seemed to agree that Paul may have been a great writer, but not a great speaker. He brings this up in 2 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 6. I may be untrained in speech, but not in knowledge. Certainly in every way and in all things we have made this evident to you. Instead, he makes the point that it shouldn't matter. Throughout the letters, and certainly here in 1 Corinthians 1, Paul challenges the Corinthians to turn their eyes away from cultural expectations and instead seek the deeper, more paradoxical truth, as he brings up in verses 23 through 25. But we proclaim Christ crucified, a stumbling block to Jews and foolishness to Gentiles, but to those who are called, both Jews and Greek, Christ, the power of God and the wisdom of God. For God's foolishness is wiser than human wisdom, and God's weakness is stronger than human strength. God's wisdom doesn't rely on humans rising to expectations. A crucified body typically signifies defeat at the hands of the Romans. Turn this imperial torture device into a hallmark of salvation and triumph reveals God's transforming power to push far beyond the normal logic of this world and reveal a far greater power. Still, the Corinthians want this power related in the normal wrapper with all the correct trappings of Greek success. We keep stepping on this particular rake as well, to our own detriment. Flash forward a couple of thousand years, and we still want our religious teachers to radiate the aura of success. Only the nature of said aura has changed in the intervening centuries. We no longer seek Greek eloquence. 21st century church judges its truth speakers on how big a crowd they can draw. We essentially say to pastors, By all means, speak the truth of God, but do so in a way that brings the numbers. To truly succeed, it matters less how true one's message might be, and more how many bottoms will place themselves in seats to hear it. We cheerfully ignore that the largest crowd sizes in the New Testament top out at a handful of thousand, and that Jesus and the early apostles spent most of their lives working with individuals and small groups. Just like our Corinthian forebears, we carefully avoid the reality that none of the heroes in the New Testament, Jesus included, ever looked particularly successful. In the economy, companies make the profits go up. In church world, the pastor makes the number of attendees go up. Surely a message with so many people responding to it must be true and blessed and divine wisdom. It is. Sometimes. Maybe even most of the time. But occasionally, we hand the keys of the kingdom over to people who are far better at getting the numbers than speaking the truth. Secular press can feel quick to jump all over the latest megachurch pastor with the moral failing, toxic church culture, cultish levels of control over their members, misappropriation of funds, or the ranting of toxic, hateful, and insane things from God's pulpit. But our church cultures made them possible. Just in the past month, Aaron Ivey, now former worship pastor of Austin Stone Community Church, had to step down because of inappropriate and explicit communications with congregants and predatory manipulation of a minor. This guy had all the trappings. A write-up in the Washington Post, a successful podcast, on top of a front-facing role at a huge congregation. Too often, to count, we tolerate the behavior because these folks sure can draw a crowd. And only stop when it becomes too obvious or the blowback becomes too intense. When the desire for church leadership boils down to an ability to project earthly success, we make ourselves vulnerable to some downright earthly results. These guys committed their own sins, and to the Corinthians' credit, Apollos seems to have been preaching God's truth. They simply failed to recognize truth in a less successful looking vessel, and we got so obsessed with bigness that we equate it with truth. Mike Cosper reaches this conclusion by the end of his investigative podcast into the failings and excesses of Mark Driscoll, The Rise and Fall of Mars Hill. He points out our collective guilt for wanting big, not always caring how we got there, and setting people like Driscoll up to wreak havoc. Cosper also opens every episode of the show with a recognition that the story of Mars Hill, and by extension the Church Universal, is, quote, also about the mystery of God, working in broken places, end quote. Thank God that the foolish, paradoxical wisdom of God breaks through even our love of earthly success. In the places where we let the brokenness lead, God weaves in redemption. That doesn't get us off the hook. I wrestle with this a lot. I got where I am in life, in part on the back of my ability to entertain a crowd. I've been doing that my whole life. I only started preaching like 10 years ago. For me, it's a constant spiritual discipline that I don't always succeed at, to hold myself accountable to seek to speak truth, and not just put on a show. To remember that God does the real work, and to reject the idea that I'm defined by my crowd size. For us all, we need to keep in mind that one of the greatest writers of Christian truth of all time, Paul, had to defend his bona fides because he didn't look successful. That we would probably pass him by for similar reasons. That our key symbol of faith is a Roman execution method. God's wisdom doesn't look right in our eyes because we need God to help give us better eyes.
So as you just heard in the piece,
I am increasingly becoming convinced that the Corinthians are the ultimate predictor of modern Christianity. This has come up a couple of times now as we're in a part of the lectionary where we're spending more time in First Corinthians. And so I've had a lot of time to reflect on First Church Corinth. And the truth is, they really predict how we were all going to keep behaving as like this kind of modern mainstream, at least in the United States, mainstream Christianity, which is kind of a hoity-toity, Christianity that often I think really seems to care about the things that the world cares about. And so, here we get the expectations. This is about the expectations of church leadership. We talked about church build this and the concept of church buildings and grand architecture, but all of our this should be grand, this should be elevated, and this is what we should expect from people. We seem to inherit almost just straight from our dear friends, the Corinthians.
Indeed. This reminded me very much of, have you seen the story of the new pastor that shows up dressed as a homeless beggar?
Yes, yeah.
Outside of the church. Right. And it's not what the church expected. And so they are testing the church in essence of how are they going to be treated? And, maybe it doesn't look like what you think it should. But they did this to Paul, right?
Yeah.
They did this to Paul. Paul did not look like or act like they thought Paul should. And so they were questioning Paul's authority.
Paul's long-term leadership in that church, they found a guy that did, right? And I tried to soften my approach because I really am picking on Apollos here. By the way, I suspect Apollos wrote Hebrews. If we ever get to Hebrews, I suspect Apollos wrote it. I don't think Apollos is some heretic. There certainly are plenty of folks that are splitting churches apart with bad theology, and I don't really think Apollos is to blame here. Apollos' main, it's not even crime, but main challenge in Paul, I don't even really get the sense that Apollos is going around and saying, Paul is wrong. It's just Apollos fits what they're looking for, and Paul does not fit what they're looking for. And rather than expand what they're looking for, they're like, Paul, do you really have authority? Because you sure don't, there may be, I don't know if there's truth in what you're saying or not, but you sure don't look like this other guy. And, have you seen how cool, whatever this other guy is? Have you seen him?
Right.
You're not like him. Are you even a pastor? Right, that's the pit. That's the thing that Paul is responding to in this, by the way, he's talking about his own foolishness. Meanwhile, he's flexing his amazing intelligence because this is just this astounding piece of comedic writing of he's both mocking them and making his point and showing them to be the fools, right? But anyways, it comes back to they are looking at Paul. This whole letter, in a way, is they're looking at Paul and going, you sure don't look the way we expect. And we're challenged by that. And Paul essentially going, really, y'all? You think that's what matters? What the truth of what we've been saying makes you think that this is the thing that matters?
Right. Reminds me of who was it that asked you that you're the pastor?
Oh, yeah. This was, a lot of people, when they first arrive at a church, this person was mad at their previous church, and so she showed up at our church on a Wednesday night, and of course told us the same thing that many other people tell us, that we're going to be best friends forever and it'll be all the time, and then we never saw her again. But I was not as saddened by that one as I often am. You want folks to stick around, and because when she laid eyes on me, and I don't know if I said I was the pastor or I was introduced as the pastor. It was very loud in my head. I think it was still pretty loud in the rooms. You're the pastor? Yeah. To quote Ron in Harry Potter, always the note of surprise with you.
Right.
And Reagan, I don't know if this is a thing y'all have heard. We are producing around a trip that I'm going to be on for a week. And so I don't know when you've heard anything, but Reagan Seaton and I talk about this on how to restart a church side, either in an episode you've already heard or an episode that is upcoming, that this is something that both her and I experience. Her because she's a female lead pastor, and me because I look like a dirtbag. But neither of us are often, none of us on this show at the moment are folks that people normally expect to be speaking God's truth.
Right. Well, and even just the way that ministries happen sometimes, the way in which ministries are supposed to look, according to folks. And when you try to challenge that norm, when you start to get those Corinthian questions of, are you sure that's discipleship? Are you sure that's really ministry? Because it's not the metric that we've used before, or it doesn't look like it because it's not, bottoms and pews, or it's not, the numbers going up, or it's not another Sunday school class. But changing models of ministry looking different than it did before can also be a challenge to folks to go, that's ministry? That's discipleship? Yes, it can be.
I was at a pastor's retreat first half of this week and heard an amazing sermon by a colleague of ours, Michael Jarbo, who's a United Methodist pastor here locally. He also has a podcast, by the way, called Working It Out. He told a story in this sermon about going to Portland, Oregon, the least religious city in the country, and going and finding out that their soccer team has a chaplain. Soccer team has a chaplain. And the soccer team essentially is a massive worship service. No, we don't call it that. We call it a soccer match. But they sing a song at the 80th minute of every game. You Are My Sunshine. Because the mascot guy isn't a guy in a mascot suit. It's this giant lumberjack man. And his daughter had died when she was 8. And her favorite song was You Are My Sunshine. And so every game, the crowd sings this man, his daughter's favorite song. If that's not the healing work of God, Michael's point, and I'm echoing it, is if that's not the healing work of God in someone's life, I don't know what is.
Right.
But I also, in the piece, and some of this is just, maybe we've dealt too much with the dark side of when this all goes wrong in our lives, and so we are traumatized. And so actually,
maybe
in the piece for my upcoming sermon, I'm taking everything in a wildly more positive direction because, the Corinthians could take me to a really dark place because I have seen the danger that we open ourselves up to when we have these very worldly expectations of shepherds. We then hand the keys of the kingdom over and get some incredibly tragic results.
Right.
Because
their shepherds looked like what you thought they should, or sounded like what you thought they should, and then it all fell apart.
And made you feel the things that you thought you should. And yes, right. Thank you, Mike Cosper of The Rise and Fall of Mars Hill, for giving me a frame in which to reflect on that does not leave me in a spiritual void, that it's also about the mystery of God working in broken place. I can get he has a much better radio voice than I do, but I can get the vocal rhythm. It's also about the mystery of God working in broken places. Right? Yes, absolutely. And so I am not saying that their ministry is devoid of God, but that has a lot more to do with God than anybody else. That's true for all of us.
Right.
But when we live in a whole society that number go up, infinite growth. And so if we have the pastor that can provide us that infinite growth, not spiritual growth, numerical growth.
Numerical metrics. Yeah.
Even in places we live in the United Methodist Church, there's this incredibly structured denomination with, we think, all these checks and balances. And even we fall victim to it of oh my gosh, he moves the numbers. Yeah. But at what cost?
At what cost?
There's real danger if we don't heed what Paul is saying of, hey, measure this by the truth of God, not some cultural expectation.
Right.
Also remember that even Jesus, the Word of God made flesh, never preached to more than 5,000 people.
Right.
At any point.
Right.
Capped out at 5. Right? Spent most of his time. He had very little time. He had 3 years in which to save the entire world.
Right.
Right? All of his preaching, teaching, miracles, from baptism to ascension is like 3 years.
3 years.
He spent his early 30s saving all of humanity. It's remarkable.
Right.
And even the guy that spent his early 30s saving all of humanity, he spent a lot of time one-on-one, talking with individual people, not always getting positive results.
Right.
Getting essentially murdered by his friends.
Right.
Right? If Billy Graham, I don't want to dunk on Billy Graham because I don't know the guy. But like, Jesus, that is not what the work of Christ on earth did not look like stadium worship.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It looked a lot like talking to the man who had the least amount of time imaginable to do the most imaginable, to teach us everything we need to know. He ate with like small groups.
Right.
He healed individual people.
Small individual conversations with women at a well. And, absolutely, absolutely different than the metrics that we would use today. I had a ministry experience with a colleague once that was, it was just one of those outreach ministries where you go and you start serving people for the sake of serving people out in the community. It was not meant to be any sort of big event. It was just pastors going and doing something. And even that became, well, how many business cards do you think we can hand out? And I went, no, you've missed the point. Like, that's not the point. Like, if they want a business card and they want to come and visit us in the church, like, great. Like, let's be that point of invitation. Sure. Yes. Give people an opportunity to come and experience the grace of God within the congregation and what we are doing. However, the point of that ministry that day was to go and to do and to be for people a point of contact for discipleship, not an invitation to your church.
And not an invitation to make number go up.
Right.
That number may not go up. I was joking about the finance of our church. Number always go down. I don't know. Number always go down. And even in the moments, we have parts of our ministry where number go up, and that's great. And I enjoy a season where like we are reaching more people than we did this time last year. That's really cool.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't mean that, we don't want people. It just means that's not, that we open ourselves up for danger when we think that the key thing our leader does is make people number go up. That is, and like we have to turn in.
That's their job.
That's the job. That the job is.
That is not the job.
To make number go up, because there are a lot of faithful ways by which you can make number go up. You can just be a really great preacher and that people just really connect with what you're saying. Or you can start to lean on those more manipulative practices. Or you can water down your theology. I mean, I have more offensive ways to say this, but, if you want a youth number go up, just advertise pizza and pretty girls and your youth group will be full. I suspect.
Right.
If you just lead with there is pizza and this is, let's be clear, we were on an episode you'll hear next week, I talk about that I am still a sinner. That would have worked on me. And that might have been why I was at part of why I was at youth group to begin with was pizza and pretty girls. But like, just lead with that. Knock all the spiritual content out of it. If the key metric is just number of youth in the building, pizza and pretty girls, That's going to, and then you got to figure
Right.
out how to get those two things present. And then it will be astounding the number of people that will be in your building.
But then what sort of depth do you get at that youth group, right? It's, do you want depth or do you want numbers, right? And not that numbers doesn't necessarily give you any depth. You can have a large church that is very meaningful, right? That is very deep. That is very, but should the goal be that? Should the goal be we have to have X amount of people by next spring or whatever?
Well, and this is where it gets to, the issue isn't Apollos. The issue is the Corinthians' expectation of leader to look like Apollos. Apollos has got the credentials, and Apollos has got the suave, and he also, because, I think he wrote Hebrews, every indication that he's also teaching truth, right? Again, the issue is not Apollos. The issue, in this case, there are other people who show up, and Paul's like, yeah, no, that guy, bad news. John, in writing the first couple chapters of Revelation, there are people that he'll call out like, yeah, that dude, bad news, throw him out, or you're got a problem. That's not Apollos. The issue is actually that the Corinthians look at Apollos and see leader, and look at Paul, who is also slinging truth, and say, are you even called, man? You don't.
Are you even a pastor?
Are you even a pastor, man?
You're the pastor?
You're the pastor? I don't. No, but it's not even that. It is, I don't think you're the pastor. You need to justify yourself. That's not what that woman says. That is what that woman implied to me.
Right.
It's very traumatic. But yeah, I think Paul then also uses this as a wonderful teaching moment to not even make this about him, but to make this about the reality of God. And the reality of God is that God's wisdom is far greater than ours. And so things that look foolish to us, like a cross, are actually the thing that has the power, the very power and presence of God within it.
Yes, 100%.
That the things that part of the issue in all of this is our wisdom sucks. Right? Because the very truth of God rings like foolishness to our ears.
Right.
I mean, and so Paul, again, showing just the astounding writer that, the Corinthians pick on. Apparently he doesn't talk good. It's part of the problem. Even back then, they really expect you to talk good. And I say this as a person who does talk, who's gotten where he is in life.
Who talks good?
Who talk good?
Yeah.
That boy sure is. He may be dumb as a post, but he sure does talk good. Yeah. Actually putting the content in the talk good is the harder part, is the challenge for me, which is clearly not the challenge for Paul. Paul's got that all day. But Paul, being this amazing writer, structures this to say, yeah, you're looking at me and you are not seeing the wisdom of God, and that's troubling. You need to really unpack the fact that you are not smarter than God, that the things you think are wise may actually be utter foolishness. And I bring up some history in the sermon. I brought up some history of science. The Voyager spacecrafts are billions of miles away, and they're beaming back signals. And like 130 years ago, the height of scientific wisdom was that signals were never going to go more than a half a mile. That radio waves, they called Hertzian waves at the time, because they didn't have the word radio waves. That Oliver Lodge, this important British scientist, was like, yeah, no, I mean, he made it go like 180 feet. It's like, that's a big deal. It goes 180 feet, but this is going to be of limited commercial use because maybe it can only go like half a mile. And then this crazy young Italian guy named Marconi, within less than 40 years of Lodge making that statement, had made a signal transmit across the Atlantic Ocean. Right. Because it's just but that was the height of wisdom, was that radio waves are only able to go a half mile. And within 40 years of him making that statement, they were crossing the Atlantic. And now, a century, less than a century and a half later, we have signals that we are receiving from a spacecraft 12 billion miles away. Now, we can't interpret what it's saying. We think something's kind of broken on Voyager, but we're still getting.
Or got reprogrammed.
Or it got
Or got
reprogrammed by the
reprogrammed.
aliens.
I think the aliens did it.
Dispatch the Enterprise. Anyways, but like, this is this like, I think it's dangerous when we lump this into humans, but also we need to zoom out and understand the infinity of God and our finitude, finitude. There's a word
finitude, yes.
Yeah, our finiteness and God's infiniteness, and so we are not always going to fully comprehend, and what we don't comprehend, we often write off as foolish, when in fact it is just wisdom beyond our comprehension.
Right. Maybe you don't know what you think you know. And also, maybe it's okay that you don't know all the things yet, right? You also brought up in your sermon the idea of the Trinity, right? We can't make 3 equal 1 in any known form of physics or mathematics. It does not make sense. However, we know it to be true because God's math is not our math, right? The math won't math there.
The math won't math. And it is shocking the number of times we've tried to math it. And every time we try to math it, it gets declared a heresy. Now, I don't remember all of these.
We get it wrong.
Yeah, we get it wrong. And so like one of those like really like, oh, is it like the states of matter? Right? This is modalism. And
the states of water.
No, it's not like the states of water, right? That's a heresy. So like we try to like break it down so that like, oh no, but it's so like, we either like stress like it's not really 3, or we stress like it's not really 1, and we like contort ourselves in trying to make it make sense. And
but actually
it is.
It's a mystery. It's the mystery of communion. It's the mystery of baptism. It's God is present in communion. It's why we call it a holy mystery, because we don't get to understand it yet. And that's okay. And maybe that's okay.
Maybe that's more than okay. Maybe that's great. Actually,
maybe that's how it's supposed to be.
Well, because I'm a person who likes understanding things. I in the Harry Potter
like to take things apart.
I'm a Ravenclaw.
Know how they work.
And I deliberately break things to fix them, right? Like I like knowing things. I like understanding things. It wasn't until I learned the history of Scripture and how it came together that I even liked the Bible. And so I am the least likely person to tell you it's okay to be a mystery, but it's okay. It's a mystery because it speaks to God's greatness.
Yes.
It tells us something really potent about God that we cannot fully wrap our heads around all of this. And so we write it off as foolishness.
Yes.
That might indicate, what I take this to indicate, is that we are dealing with an intelligence beyond our ability to put it in a box.
Right. Which is not a bad thing. Maybe that is a great thing. And so maybe don't pretend like we got all the answers.
Every time someone explains quantum physics to me, I want to take a nap. Every time someone explains quantum physics to me, I want to go to sleep. And it's not because I'm bored. It's because my brain has fallen out and just, I hurt. Like, okay, step 1. Okay, light is both a particle and a wave. Okay, I'm good so far. And okay, and electrons. Yeah, I know electrons. Sometimes they're there and sometimes they're not there. And I'm out. I have no idea. I understand that so much of like modern life is grounded on, and that's not even the deepest part of it. That's just at that point, my brain has broken. There is a cat. Yes, there's a cat. The cat is in the box. Okay, the cat is in the box. If you open the box,
the cat is both alive and dead.
The cat is both alive and dead because if you open the box, the cat will die. What? No, help. Can I have a grown up? Save me.
Right.
That doesn't mean that quantum physics is wrong. I'm making it sound nuts because I'm doing a comedy thing. It's just quantum physics specifically is the thing that I have found. Like Einstein, I'm good, right? Like, like an object doesn't just bend space, it bends time. Okay. I've gotten that far. I lose it at electrons sometimes there and sometimes not. Y'all, things are either there or they are not. They are not both not there and there. But I am told that a lot of my modern life, modern telegraphy, modern computing, all of this relies on quantum physics having been correct. So, or correct enough.
Okay.
Okay. Help.
Sure.
Yeah. But that doesn't make it wrong. I just cannot, like, reasonably intelligent guy. Can't do it. Don't, like,
right.
Just my brain absolutely breaks. The novel Finnegan's Wake by James Joyce. It is it is insane. It is not explicitly written in English, but it's written not even in like normal language. It is nuts. I had a friend in high school who loved that book. He went on to become a professor of like poetry. Shout outs to him. It's great. I read that and I go, Sean, I don't know what you're seeing. I don't see it. I can't. I am sure that book is really smart and there's something deep at its core that I would even benefit from knowing. My little broken brain ain't getting there. And these are just other things that either discovered by humans or created by humans. That is
right.
Beyond
this is not even the godly things that are beyond humanity.
So all of this is to say that it's probably really positive for the divine human relationship. It says something about the power of God, that there are aspects to God that sound foolish to us and yet then are also true. Because it means that God is wiser than we are.
Thank God.
Because holy cow.
Yeah.
Also, if you understand Finnegan's Wake, email us, thegoodnessofgodpod@gmail.com. I would love to know. Because I suspect, again, I'm doing a bit, but I'm doing a bit that recognizes there's probably something really profound in there. But I can't find it. Also, if you have other feedback for the show, thegoodnessofgodpod@gmail.com, thegoodnessofgodpod@gmail.com. If you would like to follow us and experience the totality of what we do around here, it's Servants Now right now, really good in 3 places. Facebook.com/Servants Now. That has the benefit of our 10 a.m. Sunday morning worship service. Goes up there live, usually when it works, which is 95% of the time. YouTube.com gets sermons, gets podcasts, gets short form video, and then our website gets also the written material added into that, and that is servantsnow.org. This show and everything we do here in the Media Lab is made possible by a generous innovators grant for the Texas Annual Conference at the United Methodist Church. If you would like to help support our show, like, comment, subscribe, leave us 5-star reviews on Apple Podcast. All of that helps us get more places. And go in peace to love and serve the Lord. We'll see you next time.